third graders! Today we're going to read chapters 4, 5, and 6 of George's Marvelous Medicine. These are all shorter chapters. Chapter 4 is called Animal Pills. At this point, George suddenly had an extra good wheeze. Although the medicine cupboard in the house was forbidden ground, what about the medicines his father kept on the shelf in the shed next to the hen house? The animal medicines. What about those? Nobody had ever told him he mustn't touch them. Let's face it, George said to himself. Hairspray and shaving cream and shoe polish are all very well, and they will no doubt cause some splendid explosions inside the old geezer. But what the magic mixture now needs is a touch of the real stuff, real pills and real tonics to give it punch and muscle. George picked up the heavy 3/4 full pot and carried it out to the back door. He crossed the farmyard and headed straight for the shed alongside the hen house. He knew his father wouldn't be there. He was out haymaking in one of the meadows. George entered the dusty old shed and put the stewing pot on the bench. Then he looked up at the medicine shelf. There were 5 big bottles there. 2 were full of pills, 2 were full of runny stuff, and 1 was full of powder. I'll use them all, George said. Grandma needs them. Boy, does she need them. The first bottle he took down contained an orange-colored powder. The label said, "For chickens with foul pest, hen gripe, sore beak, gammy legs, cockeritis, egg trouble, broodiness, or loss of feathers. Mix 1 spoonful only with each bucket of feed." Here's our first picture. You can see George looking at all the different medicines, and he's got his large bucket. "Well," George said to himself aloud as he tipped in the whole bottle full, "the old bird won't be losing any feathers after she's had a dose of this." The next bottle he took down had about 500 gigantic purple pills in it. For horses with hoarse throats, horse as in a sore, scratchy throat, it said on the label, "The horse-throated horse should suck 1 pill twice a day." "Grandma may not have a hoarse throat," George said, "but she's certainly got a sharp tongue. Maybe they'll cure that instead." Into the pot went the 500 gigantic purple pills. And then there was a bottle of thick yellowish liquid. "For cows, bulls, and bullocks," the label said, "will cure cowpox, cow mange, crumpled horns, bad breath in bulls, earache, toothache, headache, hoofache, tail ache, and sore udders." Here he is putting all of the medicine in. Let's see what he does with this next medicine. "That grumpy old cow in the living room has every one of those rotten illnesses," George said. "She'll need it all." With a slop and a gurgle, the yellow liquid splashed into the now nearly full stew pot. The next bottle contained a brilliant red liquid. "Sheep dip," it said on the label. "For sheep with sheep rot and for getting rid of ticks and fleas. Mix 1 spoonful in 1 gallon of water and slosh it over the sheep. Caution, do not make the mixture any stronger or the wool will fall out and the animal will be naked." Oh no, here's Roxy as my sister's dog. "By gum," said George, "how I'd love to walk in and slosh it all over Grandma and watch the ticks and fleas go jumping off her. But I can't, I mustn't, so she'll have to drink it instead." He poured the bright red medicine into the pot. The last bottle on the shelf was full of pale green pills. "Pig pills," the label announced, "for pigs with pork prickles, tender trotters, bristle blight, and swine sickness. Give 1 pill per day. In severe cases, 2 pills may be given, but more than that will make the pig rock and roll." "Just the stuff," said George, "for that miserable old pig back there in the house. She'll need a very big dose." He tipped all the green pills, hundreds and hundreds of them, into the stewing pot. There was an old stick lying on the bench that had been used for stirring paint. George picked it up and started to stir his marvelous concoction. The mixture was as thick as cream, and as he stirred and stirred, many wonderful colors rose up from the depths and blended together, pinks, blues, greens, yellows, and browns. George went on stirring until it was all well mixed. But even so, there were still hundreds of pills lying on the bottom that hadn't melted. And there was his mother's splendid powder puff floating on the surface. "I shall have to boil it all," George said. "1 good quick boil on the stove is all it needs." And with that, he staggered back toward the house with the enormous, heavy stewing pot. Here he is carrying it back. It's leaving the barn or the hen house. On the way, he passed the garage, so he went in to see if he could find any other interesting things. He added the following: "Half a pint of engine oil to keep Grandma's engine going smoothly. Some antifreeze, to keep her radiator from freezing up in the winter, a handful of grease to grease her creaking joints. Then back to the kitchen. Chapter 5, The Cook-Up. In the kitchen, George put the heavy stewing pot on the stove and turned up the gas flame underneath it as high as it would go. "George," came the awful voice from the next room, "it's time for my medicine." "Not yet, Grandma," George called back. "There's still 20 minutes before 11 o'clock. "What mischief are you up to now, there?" Granny screeched. "I hear noises." George thought it best not to answer this one. He found a long wooden spoon in the kitchen drawer and began stirring hard. The stuff in the pot got hotter and hotter. Soon the marvelous mixture began to froth and foam. A rich blue smoke, the color of peacocks, rose from the surface of the liquid, and a fiery, fearsome smell filled the kitchen. It made George choke and splutter. It was a smell unlike any he had smelled before. It was a brutal and bewitching smell, spicy and staggering, fierce and frenzied, full of wizardry and magic. Here he is. He's cooking it all up. My goodness, what is it going to turn into? Whenever he got a whiff of it in his nose, firecrackers went off in his skull and electric prickles ran along the backs of his legs. It was wonderful to stand there stirring this amazing mixture and to watch it smoking blue and bubbly and frothing and foaming as though it were alive. At one point, he could have sworn he saw bright sparks flashing in the swirling foam. And suddenly, George found himself dancing around the steaming pot, chanting strange words that came into his head out of nowhere. Here's his words. "Fiery broth and witch's brew, foamy froth and riches blue, fume and spume and spoondrift spray, fizzle, swizzle, shout hooray, watch it sloshing, swashing, sploshing, hear it hissing, squishing, spissing, Grandma better start to pray." Oh my goodness, there he is. He is running around singing his song. Last chapter for today, Chapter 6, Brown Paint. George turned off the heat under the stewing pot. He must leave plenty of time for it to cool down. When all the steam and froth had gone away, he peered into the giant pot to see what color the great medicine was. It was a deep and brilliant blue. "It needs more brown in it," George said. "It simply must be brown, or else she'll get suspicious." George ran outside and dashed into his father's tool shed where all the paints were kept. There was a row of cans on the shelf, all colors, black, green, red, pink, white, and brown. He reached for the can of brown. The label said simply, "Dark brown gloss paint, 1 quart." He took a screwdriver and prized off the lid. The can was 3/4 full. He rushed it back to the kitchen. He poured the whole lot into the pot. The pot was now full to the brim. Very gently, George stirred the paint into the mixture with a long wooden spoon. Aha! It was all turning brown. A lovely, rich, creamy brown. "Where's that medicine of mine, boy?" came the voice from the living room. "You're forgetting me. You're doing it on purpose. I shall tell your mother." "I'm not forgetting you, Grandma," George called back. "I'm thinking of you all the time, but there are still 10 minutes to go." "You're a nasty little maggot," the voice screeched back. "You're a lazy and disobedient little worm, and you're growing too fast." George fetched the bottle of Grandma's real medicine from the sideboard. He took out the cork and tipped it all down the sink. He then filled the bottle with his own magic mixture by dipping a small jug into the pot and using it as a pour. He replaced the cork. Here he is. He's replacing the medicine. Let's see what he's up to. Had it cooled down enough yet? Not quite. He held the bottle under the cold tap for a couple of minutes. The label came off in the water, but that didn't matter. He dried the bottle with a dishcloth. All was now ready. This was it. The great moment had arrived. "Medicine time, Grandma," he called out. "I should hope so, too," came the grumpy reply. The silver tablespoon in which the medicine was always given lay ready on the table on the kitchen sideboard. George picked it up. Holding the spoon in one hand and the bottle in the other, he advanced into the living room. All right, tomorrow we will continue reading. Our next chapter is called Grandma Gets the Medicine. Let's find out what happens. I'll see you guys then. Bye.